In the last 6 months, I've learned like a whole new set of problems that are happening as we bring robotics and automation to manufacturing and warehouse floors. It's like, all right, well, now I've got two fleets of robots, and do they talk to each other? And now we're trying to figure out like how do we orchestrate the humans, the automation, the different fleets, different vendors. You think about all of those things, and it's like a whole new set of problems.
Most people never think about the thousands of decisions it takes to get products on time. This is a story of a man who carries that responsibility every day. Hello and welcome back to the Manufacturing Culture Podcast. I'm your host, Jim Mayer. I'm so excited that you all are here today. We're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to talk with somebody, Steve Shebuski. Steve has spent his entire world in warehouses and the warehousing industry, and we're really going to dive deeper into why he entered and why he's stayed, the pride that he feels with the world of work that he is in. Before we dive into that, though, I would just love for all of you, wherever you're listening, to rate and review the podcast. Take 2 seconds, push pause, rate and review the show. It's not for my ego. It's not for Steve's ego. It's so that more people actually find the show. Every time you rate and review, some weird algorithm that I don't understand rockets us up the charts, and more people find these conversations. And these conversations are important to be having. So make sure you do that. If you like this show, make sure you check out our other shows. Work But Make It Human is all about frameworks. These are going to be consultants and authors and public speakers that have ideas on how you can change the world of work. Season 2 is just about to release, so go check that out. Check out Manufacturing Connector, our YouTube channel. That's the technology that shapes the world of manufacturing. That think software platforms, hardware platforms. If you need to change the world of work with technology, that's the show for you. But don't go listen to any of those before you listen to this one, because this is going to be a really fun episode. So without further ado, Steve Shebuski, welcome to the Manufacturing Culture Podcast, my man. How are you doing today?
Awesome. Doing awesome. Thanks, Jim. Super happy to be here. Appreciate you inviting me on the show. So looking forward to conversation today.
We're going to have a lot of fun, man. We are going to have a lot of fun. Steve, I have 2 standard icebreakers that I ask all of my guests, and you're no different. You don't get away with this without answering these. So, Steve, first question. If your life were a movie, what genre would it be? Who plays you, and what's the opening scene?
Ooh, what if my life's a movie? What genre? Well, I would say it would be something like, I don't know. I feel like I want my genre to be in like the Rocky side kinds of movies where we're just always the underdog climbing up to the top. And really, I mean, those things just fire me up. I think my life story is about just, continuing to grind, being good to people and customers, and, always learning and being humble. And so I feel like that's a great story. My kids, when I make them watch Rocky, they're like, is this like Dot Matrix, or what is, what is this? Those are still so great for me. So I'd line up to that, Jim. I think would be the thing that would define me the most.
Who plays you?
Oh man, I don't know. What's the guy's name that's he's the comedian. A lot of people say I look like him. That's in like Mall Cop. Maybe it's him. I don't know.
Kevin James? All right, I can see it. All right.
So I think, maybe somebody like that. I think in general, it'd be great. That would be a great one. I like to think, I can crack a few jokes, and, at the end of the day, that would be a good person. Probably doesn't line up to, and I don't line up to the Rocky fitness levels, but what do you say? We'll go with that.
No, I like that. Well, he was in a like underdog story. It was a Netflix film, the one where he played Sean Payton.
Yeah,
when he coached the high school football team.
I
Um,
did. I watched that with my boys. I know what you're talking about.
yeah, I watched that with my son too. Yeah, so we've got the genre. You're an underdog story. You're played by Kevin James. What's the opening scene?
Opening scene would be, I don't know, let's say for me, it's like at the end of it, it's kind of like you've got this entire career of work. So maybe it's me at the end of the road with a looking back at my life and all the things that we've have accomplished with my family and in my work, and then we zoom through all those things. I'm just kind of thinking about the end scenes of my Rocky movie where we're at the end, the ring's empty, and there's my family and all my close friends and colleagues that I've worked with, and we get to share lots of memories. So I think I love it. It would be fun to start there and then zip through the history and see how we ended up where we did,
I like
'cause
that. I
it's
like
been
that.
a windy road.
Yeah, I like that, man. And that's some good foreshadowing for the conversation we're going to have today about your story. But before we get into that, you have to answer the next icebreaker question, and it's a little less fun, but it's no less important. Steve, what does culture mean to you?
Oh, yeah. To me, over the years, it's meant, uh, it's meant everything. I start and when I think about, when I started with, one of the companies we started here in Indianapolis, it's really a culture to me is about, how your people feel enabled. It's culture to me is like the way people feel towards each other, towards their customers, and really the culture is, are you one of how we do as a team, and really what your actions are and how you behave, and what's most important to you and what you value. So that's what culture is. And I have, we'll talk about it today, but I have real specific things that I think drive a lot of success in the teams that I've worked on over the years. I'm sports guy, played soccer, at Michigan State, and then got into some distribution and manufacturing. And I know that the outcomes of all of those things are dependent on all the people that you work with, regardless of where they are and what their position is. And so just a culture of teamwork and togetherness, and really going towards the common goals and things. I get that. And it's those things are really important to me. So I think that's a long answer to that, but it's something that we think about, especially in small companies, all the time, about how we preserve it, and nurture it, and make sure that it's just something that's super important to us.
Love it. I love it. And I love that you brought team sports into it, right?
Yeah.
And specifically soccer. I'm a big soccer fan. My son plays soccer. We watch, all sorts of. We're actually taking a trip to Madrid in March to go see Real Madrid play, just because he's goalkeeper. He's 11 years old. His idol is Courtois. At 40, I think Courtois is 38, 40. He's nearing the end of his time, at
Yeah.
least with Real Madrid. And so we wanted to get over there and catch a game before he hung up the cleats at the La Liga level. So we're going to go catch a game in March, which will be fun. But drawing that back to your answer, the culture that you see in team sports, really something I've noticed is the people who play team sports and play it at a higher level, collegiate or beyond, they typically have the ability to build a good team culture in the world of work. And it translates
Yeah.
very well, because if you don't have that basis, that foundation of what accountability looks like, of what it means to build a culture or be a part of a healthy culture, then it's harder for people to do that in the world of work. Does that make sense?
I mean, I totally, first of all, I'm very jealous of your trip to Madrid. What an so I did that of almost it was almost 20 years ago now that I was there and saw a game. And there's you can't really describe it. It's not comparable to watching sports here in the
No,
US.
not at all.
You guys will have you're gonna have an amazing time. So that's gonna be awesome. But yeah, I mean, I think you're 100% right. So much about what I've brought to the my career is founded in sports and everything that I've learned in sports about, what a team looks like and what it means to have a role and what it means to, lift folks up and enable folks to get better and work together. Like all of those things to a common goal, like, all that stuff, but still have, you know, leadership and hierarchy and following the rules and being accountable. Like all those things come into play. And as anyone in sports knows, you learn some of those things the hard way. And as you get on better and better teams in your life, your roles can shift. And, as you get on more talented teams, and it doesn't mean that, it's still fun to be a part of different teams, no matter what your role is, especially if you're being successful. So that's something I've learned. Like in soccer, if the people that know it, like when I was in high school, I was like, hey, you're the best. You play center midfield. And as I got better and better teams, I've kept moving backwards on the field all the way back to marking back and things, at certain points in that career. But, it still had the same sort of impact and really important part of my life too. So yeah, definitely good relations to that, as at least as for kids and everybody else as they're starting up, to have that as a foundation is very, very important.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Great point. So let's go into your story a little bit, Steve. How did you first get into the supply chain field?
Yeah, so yeah, it's kind of an interesting story. I spent all my collegiate years studying engineering, specifically chemical engineering, and it was hard. And and then when I got into doing like an internship and really started that career at 3M, they basically put me in a lab and I was testing billboard material, like the film, spraying it, heating it. But basically, it was by myself for like 2 months doing all these tests. I tested all this stuff. I presented for like 30 minutes to a couple of my people I reported to, and they like basically handed me the next 2 months of testing and said, thanks a lot, keep rolling. And I was like, this isn't for me. I don't, I'm not by myself in a lab all day. It's not going to work. And at the time it was the .com boom. And there was some folks that I had met that were building ERP WMS manufacturing systems. And so I just jumped into that by happenstance and was, programming applications, specifically a warehouse management solution, after that, and literally never left supply chain again after I did that jump. So, you know, 4 years of commitment to chemical engineering, yet for about 90 days. And then we were off.
Love that. And I mean, it's not an uncommon theme that we see on this show, right? Where somebody goes to school for one thing and ends up doing something completely different. What I've noticed is there are very few linear paths that people have taken into the manufacturing sector or warehousing sector, supply chain sector. A lot of people take these meandering, wayward paths. Jacob Sanchez, he wanted to take home ec in high school because that's where the girls were, right?
Yeah.
And it was full, and he got placed into advanced manufacturing in high school, and now he's like one of the biggest robot nerd out there, right? But he
Yeah.
he resisted for so long. So I say that because your path is equally as nonlinear into supply chain. You thought chemical engineering was going to be this path for you.
Yeah.
So when you first got in and you started, building this WMS system, was there a moment that you realized that supply chain, what you were doing was your career, not just the job that you needed at the time, but the career that you wanted to be in or the industry you wanted to be in?
Yeah, I would say it wasn't like right away. I kind of jumped into it and it had me sort of programming the logic and different things. And, as an engineer, it's easy for me to understand patterns and different things of that nature. And so that came somewhat naturally. But like, I think at the time, and as I look back, I probably really didn't understand the scenarios and the use cases and what I was really enabling. And so as I kind of moved along, it's kind of in the career, it's like I want to be more in front of customers and things. And so as I jumped into the warehouse and on the manufacturing plant floor as a consultant of some of these applications that we were building, and really started to understand the complexities of business and movement of material, that's what got me hooked. Was like,
Got it.
man, like every one of these problems is unique in some way. As I kind of went to a few customers, it's not like we're just rinsing and repeating. Everyone's got a different layout of buildings, machinery, materials. You're in an old building, you're in a new building, you've got all these different types of constraints that aren't always the same as order profiles, SKU profiles, whatever it is. That you everything was a little bit different, and so the problem solving of optimization and efficiency and applying people, process, and technology together was always a unique problem. And I was like, this is for me, because it's always going to be something new. And that's how my brain works from a problem solving perspective. And at that point, I was hooked.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. So you went from a job building the warehouse management system into, did you go directly into consulting after that?
Right into, yes, into consulting, specifically around that. At that point, I think there's a couple of interesting customers along the way that really kind of got me into to the consulting side. I remember I had a client that was in the alcohol beverage industry a long time ago, and it was one of my first consulting gigs. And he was a person that could tell that I hadn't have a ton of experience. One of his comments was to me that was like, "Hey, you've got to really know the work to understand how to do this job." And so part of that experience just really taught me to have, especially the guys running the forklifts and the machines, and really be humble and learn from those kinds of folks to bring technology to the game. And so as I got into that and started to really look at it from that lens, I kind of, really started to gravitate towards that consulting gig from that sort of perspective. Over time, my consulting kind of changed as we had started a company with some folks. Originally, I joined Blue Horseshoe almost 25 years ago, and that went for about 20 years, where we really focused on that, and then we really kind of expanded into manufacturing and ERP as well. And so then the problems just got more significant, and the consulting got broader. But yeah, it's kind of, from those early beginnings, through today, has been really kind of my focus is in really the strategy and consulting kind of components from early on.
Have you ever felt in over your head or like you wanted to just completely blow it all up and walk away?
Yeah, I talk about this sometimes when it was, and so my career's kind of led me to where I am now at NC Connect, really driving our CPG manufacturing and distribution as an industry lead. And I tell folks here, it's like, back when the technology was probably not as stable and obviously as performant, and applications were a little bit more challenging. When we used to turn things on, I would talk to folks about the white knuckle go lives, and really whether or not you're shipping that day, and things of that nature that have been part of my past. And when you're up for 4 days trying to help a client because of certain things that have happened, so many learning lessons, and so many times where you're like, I'm not sure I'm built for this, but I think over the years, the business applications have gotten a lot better. And so I'm glad I stuck with it. Yeah. I see like folks that are on our teams now at Go Lives, where they're, out to dinner taking photos. And sometimes the old man in me is like, it's not supposed to be like that. You've got to grind it out and be up all night. But it isn't certainly the case that we've seen anymore. But yeah, there's lots of lessons learned over those years and times when you're like, man, I don't know, this is hard. So sure.
Yeah, I get that. What do you think is the most common misconception that the average everyday American citizen has about warehouse operations?
Yeah. I think that's a good question. I think that, you know, at times like I'll talk to my wife and my sons about some of the things we're working on. And, in their brains, um, when they think about warehouse, it's like how how hard like you're like picking brown boxes and moving stuff around. It's not that, you make it sound like it's a neuroscience. And so certainly hear that. I love getting into some of the nuances of some things that with folks like that all the time, when it's like when you're like, one example was when you get to talk to folks like my kids, like when Christmas comes around and everyone's trying to get their stuff before the last day. I'm like, now if you think about the warehouses right now, and they've got all these orders that are piling in because you guys ordered late, and I'm shipping from a certain place, and it's got to one place has got to skip 4 zones to California and one's local. What do you think, like all the things that are going on, so they can reorganize all these things in a way that gives them the best chance to get everybody their stuff by the date that they needed? I'm like, that's, and it's fun to see people think about, yeah, I never really thought about that. Or, you know, I just see that the brown box gets to my door and everyone's happy. Right. So yeah, I think it's just like, it's, that to me, that's the kind of fun stuff is as you're talking to folks about all the things you've seen over the years that can really drive some of those outcomes that you're looking for.
I remember early in my career, I worked for a company called Fastenal, and this
Mhm.
was
Nice.
20 plus years ago, right? So we still had fax machines. Emails were like very limited.
And then,
And I remember we had this map behind our warehouse desk that had the different zones and how long it would take to get something from point A to point B. And before I had that job, it wasn't something I ever thought about. So exactly what you're talking about, right? And 20 years ago, we didn't have like Amazon in the way we have now, where you expect shit overnight and all of
yeah,
that kind of stuff, right? But it was a big eye opener to see UPS. I was in California at the time. If I had to send something to a branch in Iowa, I had to understand how long it was going to take there based on their customer requirement, et cetera, et cetera. It
yeah.
was a wild, eye-opening experience, and that's something you do every day.
Yeah, you think about, yeah, that's a great example. I mean, just, all the orchestration of all of those constraints and different things that come into business, and everyone has different constraints about who their customers are, where their raw materials are, what constraints they have in buildings, what constraints they have with their products, what can I ship with, what can I ship with, how does it fit in a box? I mean, all of those things, have to be considered in this. And again, going back to your original question, it's just what makes this job and supply chain, I think, the best, the most fun.
I love it. So when you're working with teams out on manufacturing floors, let's keep it specific to manufacturing. When
Yeah.
you're working with teams out on manufacturing floors, what are you trying to help them build to make their lives easier? What is that thing that you do? Walk us through that.
Yeah. I mean, I think, for us, it always starts understanding the business, um, the people, the machines and the process, and really kind of, as we walk through, is really understanding material flow and goods and what's really happening. And then and that's so as we're working with manufacturers and distributors, it's really kind of first getting that sort of gemba walk look of what's happening here, And then really looking for those opportunities. Like, what are the opportunities that we have to improve process to make people's lives more simple on the shop floor, and then make sure we're focusing on the ultimate outcomes of whatever they are that any company's looking for, whether it's to increase capacity and flow, to reduce inefficiencies and scrap, or be able to increase throughput. We have those as our guiding light as we jump in there. Like, what are we trying to achieve? And then through those walks, we were just really looking at it through the lens of how do we solve specific problems. And again, for us, it always starts with the process and the people. Like, how do we, if how do we think about those two things? And then, thirdly, how do we apply technology to those things to automate, improve, help folks that are on the floor make better choices and help to achieve some of the outcomes we're trying to do. So, to me, it always starts as putting your eyes on operations with the understanding of what it is we're trying to do here.
Yeah. And so circling back to your view of what culture is, right? Your definition of culture, how is what you are helping people build impact the culture on the shop floor?
Yeah, I mean, for us, you see lots of different things these days. Like for 10 years ago, manufacturing floors looked a certain way. And like, the as we've moved forward, you're getting a mix of younger folks as well as the people that have been there for 30 years and know where all the bodies are buried, if you will. And I think as you bring a younger generation in too, it's really about like, as we improve these things and you enable people to be a part of a process and outcomes, but also as they feel a part of it, that they're able to, bring their own insights to what we're trying to achieve as a team. That's a huge part of this. As I learned in the early beginning, those folks that are on the floor, they know so much about where you can find these efficiencies, and you start to learn with those folks. So I think that's where the culture comes, is really working together with the folks that are doing the job, enabling things through technology and change that allows them to do those jobs more efficiently, which then helps those folks, continue to think about, well, what else can we do here? Like, wow, that was amazing. What else in this process? And then you start seeing that in any organization where, is, hey, if I lean in to this change, not only is, my day to day better, I feel like this, but I have a better ways to contribute. That's when you see the snowball effect in organizations and culture. So that's the stuff that I love. It's like, we always are trying to incrementally improve things. And then as you do that, you see some of that impact and outcomes in the culture as well.
I love that. Has a system you've implemented failed before?
I mean, yeah, of course, Jim. You got lots of those, right? Yeah. I mean, I think failure, is part of these things. You certainly don't want to have failures at enterprise scale, but I think part of the is that, I already talked about the white knuckled implementations. I think, part of the cool part of technology over the years is that it's become a lot more enabled to do things incrementally. Like, I don't have to like replace all the systems on the same day anymore. We can do very specific incremental improvements in a lot of areas, and incrementally move folks on different technologies. But yeah, I mean, at various locations, especially in cultures where you're allowed to try stuff. I mean, I think we're going to talk about this more, but I think that's where, an innovation where you're allowed to make mistakes and learn from them. I mean, that's where you're going to see the most incremental gain. We've tried things with systems like, hey, let's try a replenishment strategy this way, or let's try how we're bringing goods to line in a certain way that's we think is going to optimize time. But in execution, you learn something about, we didn't think of that. and this isn't perfect, and we're gonna incrementally improve it. It happens, more often than where you get it perfect. I think that's just part of the game. So yeah, 100%. Has there been you know epic failures? Maybe not epic, but always more things we could have done. Maybe 15 years ago, there was. I'll give you one example that I gave in another one that I always like to talk about. It was my first time. It's a funny story almost, but it was my first time working with robotics, and we had these ASRSs, automatical storage and retrieval systems, and we created this interface. The robots were going to go get these fire protection pallets, and they're about 1,000 pounds a pallet. And like right before we started, we had somebody asked about some exception scenario, and we're about to go live, and we changed a couple rules to impact the scenario before we turned the thing on for the first time. Turned it on, and I look up, and the robots, we ran like two orders. We're supposed to get like four pallets. Like everything was running. There's some accumulation. So we turned around, there was about 100 pallets coming out. So we had basically unit of measure, something had happened, and it was like everything's got to come out. We're gonna start over. What
Wow.
happened? So you learned in that one, trust your process, don't change things, trust your testing, and don't try to do too much. But yeah, there's been lots of examples of that over the years.
Let's talk about innovation. You alluded
Yeah.
to innovation and failure and making mistakes, and talk about how you've developed this sense of what innovation means in the warehouse space, and how taking risks and the inevitable failures
Yep.
have changed your viewpoint on innovation.
Yeah, I think so. A couple of things. I mean, you know, as you as you get especially in warehouse and manufacturing over the years, there's there you get to a point where there's kind of knows a lot of the playbooks and things. But I think what's been really fun about technology is there's always some new capabilities out there where if you have some things that you can try on a process, and do an innovation and things of that nature. I think that's so important. I think right now, and I was telling my kids this the other day, I feel very lucky to have the next decade still to be around, because the rate of change at the moment, it seems really, really high, and it would have been a bummer to miss this next decade. There's so much to do. I think it's gotten exciting for me because, just as an example, one of the things and when you think about innovation and you think about what a lot of people are working on, there's robotics and things that are going on that I want to talk about. But like as a very specific example, when we think about AI and agents and things, for me, it was really hard to get my head around, what this means in a warehouse. And so, it took a group of people, and we took some use cases with some really smart folks, smarter than me on the tech. But it was like, all right, guys, warehouse managers are constantly taking data, looking at throughput and locations and how often they replenish and how many times I have to go to the line from a manufacturing perspective, and they're pivoting it. They're looking at the size of the products. They're trying to minimize travel time, and they're reslotting to optimize all those things. So, what if we teach an agent the math that we all know, that we do? It takes us a while to do. Maybe we can, we can teach an agent to do these things, and then have it sort of make all these recommendations. And so I was skeptical, but it's like it's wild, sort of the capability when you get a really good use case. You've got some new technology. You got folks that understand it. You got folks that understand the process. That hey, this thing's making interesting recommendations. Some of them don't, like, we when we first launched it, it was like, oh, we forgot to teach it product life cycle. It's recommending things for products that are no longer are discontinued or things of that nature, and you teach it a little bit more. But that level of innovation is just like, it's really getting to understand some of the tech and like enabling a bunch of folks to try it and then apply it to what they know in the operation. It's exciting. I'm like pumped for the next decade. It's going to be crazy.
Have you come across, as you're working with AI, have you come across any hallucinations where you've asked it to think about this thing in this certain way and it's spit out something that was like catastrophic?
Yeah. It's definitely, the way that we've been thinking about it is like in the example I just gave as an example as we went through it and we actually launched some of this for a client, and like, all right, you know, give this a try. Well, we're not gonna just take all the recommendations. We're gonna look at them, and you get into some of these. Like you start to learn like how where like a warehouse or a manufacturing shop floor owner is gonna or manager is gonna talk and chat with these things and ask for the recommendations. I mean, some of these chat strings that we got sent where they were often like it was making recommendations of things that like made absolutely no sense. Products that we hadn't even that weren't even actually products. Like where did this get off of way off of base? And it's so we've seen a lot of that, and the folks that understand that technology better than I do, like can start to shape shape how those things work. But it is something that is important, but it's also super fun to watch, people like really get their head around how does how do these things work and how can they make some of my life easier to automate things that I don't shouldn't have to think about every day and bring some of this stuff to me so then I can use my experience to make decisions. Like that's been really interesting.
Got it. You said you wanted to talk about robots. Talk to us about
No, I just think,
robotics and
yeah. I mean, I think like robotics and automation, Jim. I don't know. You talk to a lot of people, which by the way, I think it's a really cool job that you got. Like, get to like like learn about all kinds of different folks' perspectives. But I think for me, for a long time, especially in the U.S., like robotics is and automation and things. It was a lot easier to throw, and sometimes cheaper to throw labor at a lot of problems. And I think that's certainly changing. And so there's a whole new like in the last 6 months, I've learned like of a whole new set of problems that are happening as we bring robotics and automation to manufacturing and warehouse floors. Is like, all right, well, now I've got two fleets of robots, and do they talk to each other? And and now we're trying to figure out like how do we orchestrate the humans, the automation, the different fleets, different vendors. You think about all of those things, and it's like a whole new set of problems, right? Which is cool. It's like everyone worries about from an AI perspective. There's certainly a lot of discussion about what people your job and your roles. To me, it's like I just see I just see people changing, what they're thinking about and what they're doing. Managers on shop floors are thinking about orchestration of different things than they did 10 years ago. So that's another one where it's just the rate of change is really high and people are trying to figure out some new and interesting things to optimize these facilities.
yeah, I think that, and I've said on this show before, robotics, automation, AI, they're just tools, right?
Yeah.
And
Oh yeah.
I I mean, I look back to calculators in school, right? When I was in high school, you couldn't use a calculator unless it was like a TI-80 or whatever the Texas Instrument calculator was, right?
Yeah.
But they had to like make sure you didn't store the program for the operation in the calculator and all this stuff. It's a tool, right? I
Right.
look at when CNC machines came into the manufacturing industry, going from Bridgeports into more CNC operated milling machines, and then now you've got 5 axis, right? It's just a tool.
Yeah.
It's the people who refuse to adopt the technology that typically get left behind. It's
Yeah.
not that the tool is going to take your job. It's if you don't adopt the tool, you will lose your job, right? I think it's a mindset shift when it comes to, especially to robotics and automation. AI, we still see a lot of slop out there. I
Yeah.
know that there's a lot of platforms that have started to get AI right, but the ones that are publicly available, Claude and ChatGPT and the things that people are using to think for them, to create for them,
Yeah.
those aren't necessarily the right platforms for human or tools for humans, right? But when you
Yeah.
talk about warehouse management, when you talk about ERP, when you talk about AI being used for CAD CAM programming, that's a tool. And if you're not using that tool, then you're not advancing. So I agree with you wholeheartedly, man.
Yeah, yeah, you gotta take this stuff on, and I think, it's super important for, to and, relating back to culture, it's super important for organizations to really enable people access to the tools, right? Like we all have to, if you want an organization to move forward, you have to enable folks to make those mistakes on some of these new tools to learn. For me, I was using Microsoft came out with their MCP server, which is essentially how it connects to the ERP and you can get to manufacturing and warehouse. It wasn't until I like one day I just ingrain myself into it of I'm speaking to the ERP system and asking it to get information and do things for me through chat. And what's happening, what they did with the tool is they were actually showing me what the AI is thinking. And then it kind of clicked for me. It's like it's going through business process models. It's actually doing the logic that it already knows of what a execution step is on the floor, or order to cash, or whatever it is. And I was like, okay, so now I get it. I get it, not get it, but I get enough of it where now I understand where I need to shape how I'm talking to these things. I need to shape how I'm using the tools. And then, you get better at it. And so I think it's super important. I know you'd agree. It's like getting people access to all of these things to they can start to try and use it to improve their lives. Like that's where you're going to get again that sort of snowball effect in your organization about ideas on where it actually could provide value you know
Yeah. So after 25 years of doing what you do, what keeps you in the industry? What keeps you here?
I think, we talked about it a little bit already, Jim. It's like it's the rate of change of innovation and technology makes it more fun to keep going back to the customers and buildings and things that I've already done stuff and continue to try to incrementally improve. I think it's the so it's meeting new folks that are at different points in their journeys that maybe haven't adopted enough, or there's still a lot we can do with process. I think it's, with supply chain, there's so many aspects of incremental improvement that, it's just kind of, if you're into problem solving and creating, that kind of those kinds of outcomes, I think, that's what keeps me bringing back and hopefully, or coming back. And hopefully I can, stay at least connected to the tech close enough as I get older here that I continue to know how to and continue to get excited about getting in there and learning about it and trying to think about how we apply that as you said, as just a tool to our people and our process to continue to make those gains, right?
Yep, absolutely. Let's go back to your movie about your life.
Yeah.
You've your opening scene was the end of the underdog
Yeah.
story, and you're reflecting back. When you get back to that opening scene at the end of the film, and move beyond that, what's the legacy you want to leave in your industry? What mark are you trying to make?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Jim. I mean, you know, I think, over the years, one of the things that I've learned that I totally screwed up in the beginning was just, you know, how much to and just enablement of folks on your team. I think in the beginning I was so passionate about this company we were creating, and I cared so much that it was, that I actually wasn't, telling others to do the work, and I was trying to oversee things and, be too into everybody's details. And I think, that just burned me out, and we weren't getting great outcomes, and started to change that mindset. And I think, so and really sort of enable folks on my teams to take initiatives, to make mistakes, to drive things themselves is super important to me. And I feel like what's from a legacy perspective, I hope people feel enabled. I hope people feel that work on teams that I'm on, or that I help manage, or that they've grown a lot because of the opportunities that they get, and ability to improve. So that's kind of like a thing that used to not necessarily, like, I was very focused on the outcomes for a really long time, and it's also just internally with our own teams, just in focus on people, everybody getting better, which is, I've found to even be more satisfying, in the twilight here of the career.
That's awesome. Great answer,
Yeah.
man. I dig that. Steve, what haven't I asked you that you want to share with the audience? We're wrapping up here.
Oh, I don't know. I think, well, number one, I just appreciate the conversation. And I think from my perspective, I mean, I like relating it back to the movie. I think the one thing I was just thinking about from here is also just, as you I'm sure know, is just the constant learning is what keeps people coming back. Joining MCA Connect here, which has been the culture here has been manufacturing, for 25 years. And I'm learning, I'm in a place now where I'm leading and bringing, more process, mass manufacturing, CPG kind of stuff, which is my background. But here they know building complex machines and month-long project manufacturing. And it's super cool to like learn entirely new disciplines of folks that have dedicated 25 years of their lives to those types of processes, and how different, and what are the nuances of these things. So I just think, yeah, it was just something that I would share, is just like, for yourself and all your folks there, is there's so many different things in supply chain to continue to dive into, of disciplines and opportunities that, that we get to experience here. So keep doing that. That's important to me, and something I would share with your listeners.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Um, why do people need to listen to this episode?
Ooh. Um, I
I
think,
just thought of that. I think that that's going to be something I ask every guest. And
yeah.
sorry to spring that on you, man, but why should people listen to this?
I think it would be, I think it's interesting for folks to just, and it's interesting to me. It's why I listen all the different podcasts, yours and other supply chain ones, is like, there's so many different perspectives. Mine is my own unique story of where things came from, and starting from a unique place and growing into to various things. I always think that that's important. I think that, it's also for folks that are listening, it's just like, what, is from a consulting perspective, if you're a company running a manufacturing, like, what are your consultants thinking about, and what should they be thinking about? I think that might be interesting for some of your listeners coming from that perspective, as they're, and what kind of outcomes they should be driving, and how they should be looking at it. And I think for anybody that's entering the workforce right now, this might be interesting as well, as just like, what are people's journeys, not to get impatient, be patient, learn the work, right? And understand what businesses are really doing. Talk to the folks on the floor of your new companies, talk to people. You're going to learn a lot, and then and that'll help you apply it to your job and get better.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. Uh, Steve, thanks for being on today. This was an awesome conversation. I really appreciated the conversation and your time that you spent with us. I mean, you're a busy dude. You didn't have to spend an hour talking with me. So thanks for spending some time with me today.
I loved it. I love talking with folks about supply chain. So happy to do it anytime. Loved your stories and perspective as well, Jem. So thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, Steve's story shows us that reliable supply chains affect everyone every day. His work shows how responsibility lives in people and in teams and sometimes in systems, but the people and the teams are responsible for those systems. Manufacturers, the people out there listening, they rely on the steady hands to get the technology implemented and deployed and out there. So this work matters quietly in the background, but it's also so visible in whether every day we see success or failure. So again, thank you, Steve. Ladies and gentlemen, please rate and review the show. Until next time, keep making things.
Love it.